My name is Joyce, and I'm 53 years old. For 25 years, I was a single mother who sacrificed everything for my son Marcus. I built a successful catering business from nothing paid for his college education, bought him cars, and gave him every opportunity I never had. 2 weeks before his wedding, I received a text message that I thought would be a thank you for funding his entire $85,000 dream wedding. Instead, what I read changed everything in a single moment. Before I share what that message said, please let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt unappreciated by the very children you sacrificed everything for. The story of how I became the mother I was starts with heartbreak. When Marcus was 5 years old, his father walked out on us without warning or explanation. No child support, no weekend visits, nothing, just gone. Suddenly, I found myself alone with a kindergartner and bills I couldn't afford on my receptionist's salary. Those early years were brutal. I worked 3 jobs just to keep our heads above water. Days at the medical office, evenings waiting tables at Denny's, and weekends cleaning houses for wealthy families who barely acknowledged my existence. I remember those nights when Marcus would fall asleep at the kitchen table while I helped him with homework, both of us surviving on ramen noodles because that's all we could afford. While other mothers went on dates or had social lives, I stayed home. Every invitation declined, every romantic possibility rejected. Marcus was my world, my purpose, my everything. I told myself that someday, when he was successful and happy, all these sacrifices would be worth it. When Marcus was 12, I started baking cakes and cookies for neighbors to earn extra money. What began as desperation slowly grew into something more. Word spread about my desserts, and soon I was catering small parties and events. By the time Marcus graduated high school, I had built a thriving catering business. The same hands that once scrubbed other people's toilets now crafted elegant wedding cakes and gourmet meals for the wealthy families I used to clean for. Every dollar I earned went toward Marcus's future. His college education at State University cost me $180,000, over 4 years' money I gladly paid because education was the key to the life I never had. When he graduated with his marketing degree, I bought him his first car, a reliable Honda Civic, for $15,000. As my business grew, I upgraded him to a BMW because I wanted him to project success in his career. Nothing was too good for my son. Marcus landed a great job at a marketing firm downtown, and I felt such pride watching him succeed. He was everything I had dreamed he would become: smart, ambitious, and charming. For 20 years, it had been just us against the world. We had weekly dinners, daily phone calls, and he always made time for his old mom. I thought our bond was unbreakable, forged in those early years of struggle and strengthened by all my sacrifices. I had no idea how quickly everything could change. Everything shifted when Marcus met Sarah at his office. She was a graphic designer, beautiful and confident in ways I had never been. The first time he brought her home for dinner, I tried so hard to make her feel welcome. I cooked all evening, set my best table, and genuinely wanted to love whoever made my son happy. But something felt off from the moment she walked through my door. Sarah was polite but distant, answering my questions with short responses while scrolling through her phone. When I asked about her family or her interests, she barely looked up. I noticed how she would subtly redirect conversations away from our shared memories or inside jokes. It was as if she was marking her territory, establishing that those bonds belonged to the past. Within months, Marcus's behavior toward me changed dramatically. Our daily phone calls became weekly, then sporadic. When I did call, Sarah was always in the background and Marcus would cut conversations short. "Mom, I'm busy," became his standard response. Gone were our leisurely dinners where we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Now, when I suggested getting together, he always had plans with Sarah's friends or her family. The worst part was watching him apologize for me. When I would call during their dinner plans or suggest activities that didn't include Sarah, Marcus would give me that patronizing tone. "Mom, you have to understand Sarah and I are building our life together. You can't expect things to stay the same." But I wasn't asking for things to stay the same. I just wanted to remain part of his life, not be completely replaced by someone who clearly resented my existence. I told myself this was normal, that all mothers went through this adjustment when their sons found serious girlfriends. I convinced myself that once Sarah got to know me better, once she understood how much Marcus meant to me, things would improve. I was determined to be the supportive future mother-in-law, even as every instinct told me I was being pushed out of my son's life by someone who saw me as competition rather than family. When Marcus called to announce his engagement, I should have been thrilled. Instead, his voice was formal, almost businesslike. "Sarah and I are getting married, Mom. We're thinking next spring." No excitement, no wanting to share the proposal story, just facts delivered like a weather report. But I pushed down my disappointment and focused on his happiness. That's when Sarah took over the conversation. She had already researched venues and fallen in love with the Ritz-Carlton. "It's the only place that really reflects our vision," she explained, as if their vision was the only one that mattered. The estimated cost was $85,000 for 200 guests. When I gasped at the number, Marcus quickly jumped in. "Mom, you know Sarah deserves the best. This is our one wedding, and we want it to be perfect." What struck me wasn't just the astronomical price tag, but how it was presented as a given that I would pay. No request, no asking if I could afford it, just an expectation. When I agreed, thinking this was my chance to show Sarah that I supported their marriage, Marcus didn't thank me. He simply said, "Great, Sarah will handle all the planning." Even in my generosity, I was being sidelined. The planning process became a masterclass in exclusion. Sarah controlled every decision from the ivory and gold color scheme to the 7-course dinner menu. When I suggested adding a few family traditions or offered input based on my catering experience, I was politely but firmly dismissed. "Mrs. Johnson, we really have this handled. Your job is just to show up and enjoy the day." My job was to pay and stay quiet. The final insult came with the seating arrangements. Despite funding the entire wedding, my table was relegated to the back corner, far from the bridal party and family tables. When I questioned this, Sarah explained that they needed the prime spots for people who are really involved in our lives. Meanwhile, Sarah's extended family, including cousins she barely spoke to, were seated at the honor tables near the altar. Even choosing Sarah's wedding dress became another opportunity for exclusion. "It's really more of a mother-daughter moment with my mom," Sarah explained when I expressed interest in joining them. "I hope you understand." I understood perfectly. I was good enough to pay for the dress, but not worthy of the experience of helping choose it. Every boundary felt like another wall being built between my son and me, with my own money funding the construction. The guest list became another battleground where my generosity was met with ingratitude. Long-time family friends who had watched Marcus grow up were suddenly cut from the invitation list due to budget constraints. Yet Sarah's sorority sisters, people she hadn't spoken to in years, all made the cut. When I protested, Marcus sided with his fiancée. "Sarah's stressed enough planning this wedding, Mom. Don't make it harder by complaining about every little thing." As the wedding approached, the financial demands escalated beyond the original budget. First, it was the honeymoon. Sarah had found the perfect resort in the Maldives, but it would cost an additional $25,000. "Mom, this is our once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon. Surely you don't want us to settle for somewhere ordinary." Marcus's tone suggested that refusing would make me selfish and small-minded. Then came the ring upgrade. The original set we had discussed was $8,000, but Sarah had fallen in love with a different design that cost $15,000. "The original rings just don't feel right anymore," she explained, as if jewelry had feelings. "These ones really represent our love story." I wondered what our story said that required such expensive symbolism, but I wrote another check. The apartment situation pushed my discomfort into genuine concern. Marcus asked me to co-sign for a downtown loft that cost $3,200 per month. "Sarah really wants to live in the city, and with my salary alone, they won't approve us. Just co-sign, Mom. You know I'm good for it." The request felt different from college expenses or wedding costs. This was an ongoing financial obligation that could last years. The final request was for a joint emergency account with $50,000. "It's just for security, Mom. Starting a marriage is expensive, and we want to know we have a cushion." When I hesitated, Marcus became irritated. "After everything you've done for us, this seems like a small thing to ask. Don't you want us to feel secure in our marriage?" Looking back, I realized I had become an ATM disguised as a mother. Every interaction centered around what I could provide financially, rather than who I was as a person or what role I might play in their lives. But I convinced myself that this generosity was love, that providing for Marcus was what good mothers did. I had no idea that my unlimited giving was actually enabling a level of entitlement that would eventually destroy our relationship entirely. Saturday morning, 2 weeks before the wedding, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. The major expenses were behind us, final payments made, and I was actually looking forward to Sarah's bridal shower that afternoon. Despite all the tension, I hoped this celebration might finally bridge the gap between us. Maybe seeing how much I had invested in their happiness would help Sarah understand that I wasn't her enemy. I was arranging flowers for the shower centerpieces when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, expecting some last-minute detail about the shower, or maybe even a thank you for all my efforts. I eagerly opened the message. What I read made my hands shake so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Mom, Sarah feels uncomfortable with how involved you've been. She thinks you're trying to control our relationship. I need you to step back. I'd rather lose you than lose her. Please respect our boundaries. I read those words 3 times, each reading hitting harder than the last. I'd rather lose you than lose her. 25 years of sacrifice, of putting him first in every decision, of building my entire life around his happiness, and this was what I meant to him. I was disposable. Sarah's discomfort mattered more than decades of unconditional love and support. The phrase kept echoing in my mind as I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the shower decorations I had spent hours perfecting. How had I raised a son who could write such words to the woman who had given up everything for him? How had my love become something he was willing to discard for someone who had been in his life for barely 2 years? But as the shock wore off, something else emerged. Clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw the situation with complete honesty. Marcus didn't want a mother, he wanted a bank account. Sarah didn't want a mother-in-law, she wanted my son isolated from anyone who might question her behavior. And I had been funding my own rejection, paying for the very wedding that would cement my exile from his life. The hurt transformed into something unexpected relief. If Marcus would rather lose me than disappoint Sarah, then perhaps it was time to grant his wish. If my presence in his life was such a burden, maybe I should remove that burden entirely. For 25 years, I had been afraid of losing my son. Now I realized that I had already lost him. I just hadn't been willing to admit it. I sat in that kitchen for 30 minutes, letting 25 years of memories wash over me. The nights I went without dinner so Marcus could have seconds. The dates I turned down because Saturday nights were for helping with school projects. The business opportunities I passed up because they would have required travel time away from him. Every sacrifice felt different now, not noble and maternal, but foolish and enabling. The decision, when it came, felt as natural as breathing. If Marcus would rather lose me than stand up to his fiancée, then he would get exactly what he asked for. I was done being taken for granted. Done financing my own disrespect, done pretending that unlimited giving was the same as healthy love. My first call was to the wedding planner. I need to cancel everything for the Mitchell Johnson wedding. Her shock was audible through the phone. Mrs. Johnson, the wedding is in 2 weeks. You'll lose most of your deposits. $15,000 down the drain, but I had never felt more certain about any decision in my life. Cancel it all. Next, I called the bank. The joint emergency account I had funded was emptied and closed within minutes. $50,000 returned to my business account where it belonged. The BMW dealership was surprisingly understanding about repossessing the car, especially since Marcus still owed $28,000 on it. Without my cosign, the apartment management company informed me that Marcus would need to find new housing or a qualified cosigner within 30 days. Each phone call felt like removing chains I hadn't realized were weighing me down. This wasn't revenge, it was boundary setting. Marcus had made his choice clear, now I was making mine. If he wanted to prioritize Sarah's feelings over our relationship, he could do it without my financial support. My response text to Marcus was deliberately brief and calm. Marcus, I respect your decision. You're an adult now, and Sarah is your priority. I'm stepping back completely as you requested. Take care. No emotion, no guilt trips, no dramatic declarations. Just acknowledgement of his choice and my response to it. I sent the message and turned off my phone feeling lighter than I had in years. The rest of the afternoon passed peacefully. I dismantled the bridal shower decorations and donated them to a local women's shelter. If Sarah wanted to be uncomfortable with my involvement, she wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. I had given them exactly what they asked for, complete independence from the mother who had supposedly been such a burden. The eruption began at 6 that evening. My phone had been buzzing constantly, but I had kept it turned off, enjoying the first peaceful afternoon I'd had in months. When I finally checked it, there were 37 missed calls and 15 voicemails, all from Marcus. The messages progressed from confusion to panic to rage as he discovered each canceled service and closed account. By 7 o'clock, Marcus was pounding on my front door with such force that my neighbor's dog started barking. Sarah was with him, mascara streaked down her face, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen her. When I opened the door, Marcus pushed past me into the living room, his face red with fury. "Mom, what the hell did you do? The wedding planner called Sarah crying because everything's been canceled. The bank says our emergency account is closed. They're coming for my car on Monday. Have you lost your mind?" His voice cracked with disbelief, as if he couldn't fathom that his actions might have consequences. Sarah collapsed onto my sofa, sobbing dramatically. "The wedding is ruined. Our friends are flying in from across the country. My dress is being altered. How could you destroy everything like this? This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives." Her anguish was real, but so was my exhaustion with being blamed for problems I hadn't created. I remained calm, which seemed to infuriate Marcus even more. "You said you'd rather lose me than lose her. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. You wanted me to step back completely, so I have. You're adults now, as you've reminded me repeatedly. Handle your own wedding, your own finances, your own lives." The argument that followed was unlike anything we had ever experienced. Marcus accused me of being manipulative, vindictive, and selfish. Sarah wailed about how I was sabotaging their future out of jealousy. Neither of them seemed to recognize the irony of demanding financial support from someone they had just told to get out of their lives. When the neighbors called the police about the noise, Marcus finally realized how far things had escalated. The officers were professional but clear this was my home and I had the right to ask them to leave. As Marcus and Sarah walked to her car, I heard Sarah screaming at him about how this was all his fault for having such a psycho mother. 2 days later, I heard through mutual friends that they were frantically trying to plan a much smaller, cheaper wedding, but the stress was taking its toll on their relationship. The 3 days following that confrontation were the quietest I had experienced in years. No frantic phone calls about wedding details, no requests for additional funds, no walking on eggshells around Sarah's sensitivities. For the first time since Marcus had gotten engaged, I could breathe freely in my own home. Marcus and Sarah's attempts to salvage their wedding plans quickly fell apart. Without the financial cushion I had provided, the harsh realities of their situation became clear. Sarah's parents, when approached about funding the reception, politely declined. "We paid for her college education," her mother reportedly said. "Wedding expenses are the responsibility of the couple or the groom's family." Suddenly, the expectation that I should fund their dream wedding didn't seem so universal. The apartment situation created additional stress. Without my cosign, Marcus couldn't qualify for the expensive downtown loft Sarah had insisted upon. They were forced to look at smaller, less prestigious options in neighborhoods Sarah considered beneath them. I heard through a former coworker of Marcus that Sarah had several emotional breakdowns about downgrading their entire life plan. What struck me most was how quickly their relationship dynamic shifted once financial pressure entered the picture. Sarah, who had been so confident about pushing me out of their lives, now blamed Marcus for not handling his mother better. Friends reported bitter arguments about money, lifestyle expectations, and family loyalty. The foundation of their relationship, built largely on my financial support, cracked under the weight of real-world responsibilities. Meanwhile, I used the $50,000 I had reclaimed to renovate my kitchen and book a long postponed trip to Italy. For 25 years, I had dreamed of seeing the country where my grandmother was born, but there had always been some expense for Marcus that took priority. Now, finally, I was putting my own dreams first. The renovation project connected me with a contractor named David, a 55-year-old widower whose wife had died 3 years earlier. Our conversations during the kitchen planning revealed a shared love of cooking and travel. When he mentioned taking a cooking class at the local culinary institute, I surprised myself by asking if I could join him. It had been decades since I had done anything purely for my own enjoyment. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. The Italian trip had been transformative not just because of the beautiful scenery and incredible food, but because I had rediscovered who Joyce was beyond being Marcus's mother. I took cooking classes in Tuscany, made friends with other travelers, and felt attractive and interesting for the first time in years. David and I had grown close during the kitchen renovation and continued seeing each other afterward. He appreciated my cooking skills, enjoyed my stories about building my business, and never once made me feel like my primary value was what I could provide financially. When he looked at me, he saw a successful businesswoman, an interesting travel companion, and a woman worthy of respect. It was intoxicating after years of being valued, mainly as an ATM. My catering business flourished with the additional time and energy I had available. Without constant interruptions about wedding planning and family drama, I could focus on growing my client base and developing new menu options. I hired 2 additional employees and booked 3 high-profile events that significantly increased my company's reputation. The personal growth extended beyond romance and career success. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, and reconnected with friends I had neglected during Marcus's childhood. These women reminded me that I had been an interesting person before motherhood consumed my identity. I had opinions about books and politics, talents beyond cooking, and organizing dreams that didn't revolve around someone else's happiness. Most surprisingly, I felt no bitterness toward Marcus or Sarah. The anger had burned away during those months of rediscovering myself, leaving behind something closer to pity. They had chosen to build their relationship on a foundation of excluding family and demanding financial support, rather than creating genuine partnership and mutual respect. That foundation was always going to be unstable. One evening in late autumn, as David and I were preparing dinner together in my beautifully renovated kitchen, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing alone on my porch. He looked thinner than I remembered his usually perfect appearance, disheveled. His expensive car was nowhere to be seen, and he was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, clearly cheaper than his usual wardrobe. Opening the door felt like looking at a stranger who happened to resemble my son. Marcus had always been meticulous about his appearance, but the man standing before me looked exhausted and defeated. His hair needed cutting, his shirt was wrinkled, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes I hadn't seen since childhood. "Hi, Mom." His voice was small, uncertain. "Could we talk?" When I invited him in, he glanced toward the kitchen where David was quietly cleaning up our dinner dishes. "I'm sorry I didn't know you had company. I can come back another time." "David, this is my son Marcus. Marcus, this is David." The introduction was awkward but necessary. Marcus seemed surprised that I had a life relationship's happiness that didn't revolve around him. David, with characteristic grace, excused himself to the living room to give us privacy, while remaining close enough if I needed support. Marcus sat at my kitchen island, the same spot where he used to do homework while I cooked dinner during his childhood. But this wasn't the confident young man who had dismissed my feelings 6 months earlier. This was someone who had learned hard lessons about consequences and independence. "Sarah and I broke up 3 weeks ago," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "She said the financial stress was too much, that she couldn't handle the drama with family, that she needed someone who could provide the lifestyle she deserved." He laughed bitterly. "Turned out she loved the idea of marrying someone whose mother would fund their dreams more than she loved me." I felt no satisfaction in being proven right about Sarah's character. Watching my son learn painful truths about someone he had defended so fiercely was heartbreaking, even after everything that had happened between us. "I'm sorry your relationship ended, Marcus. Breakups are always difficult, especially when wedding plans are involved. Mom, I owe you an apology that's 6 months overdue." His voice cracked with emotion. "The things I said to you, the way I treated you, choosing her, demands over your feelings, it was all wrong. You sacrificed everything for me my entire life, and I repaid that by telling you I'd rather lose you than disappoint someone who was using me." The tears came then, years of suppressed guilt and regret pouring out as he finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. "You were never controlling or manipulative. You were just trying to stay connected to me while I was letting someone else push you away. I was so afraid of Sarah being unhappy that I forgot who had actually earned my loyalty. I handed him tissues and waited for the emotional storm to pass. When he could speak again, he continued, "After you canceled everything, I was so angry because I thought you were being spiteful. But as the weeks went on and we struggled to handle basic adult responsibilities, I realized you weren't punishing us. You were teaching us what independence actually costs." We talked for over 2 hours that evening, the longest conversation we had shared in more than a year. Marcus told me about the financial struggles that followed my withdrawal of support, how they had been forced to plan a much smaller wedding, how the stress had revealed fundamental incompatibilities in their relationship. Sarah kept saying that families should support each other no matter what, but she only meant your family supporting us. When I suggested asking her parents for help, she said it wasn't their responsibility. Marcus shook his head ruefully. She wanted all the benefits of having you as a mother-in-law without any of the relationship aspects. Just the checkbook, not the person. He had learned to live within his actual means, finding a modest apartment he could afford on his salary alone. The BMW repossession had been embarrassing, but educational. I never realized how much of my lifestyle was subsidized by you until I had to pay for everything myself. I was living like I made twice my actual salary because you were covering the difference. More importantly, he had started therapy to understand how he had allowed his relationship with Sarah to override his values and family loyalty. The counselor helped me see that I was so desperate to prove I was an independent adult that I confused rejecting you with growing up. Real adults maintain healthy relationships with their families. They don't discard them for romantic partners. As the evening progressed, I shared stories about my trip to Italy, my growing relationship with David, and the expansion of my business. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking questions about my experiences and expressing amazement that I had accomplished so much in the months since our confrontation. "You seem really happy, Mom. Happier than I remember you being in years." His observation was accurate. "I think maybe I was holding you back as much as you thought you were helping me. You gave up so much of your own life to focus on mine that neither of us was really living authentically." When David rejoined us for coffee, the three of us talked easily about travel, cooking, and business. Marcus was gracious and respectful, asking David about his own children and showing genuine interest in our relationship. It was clear that my son had done considerable growing up in the months since our estrangement. As the evening wound down, Marcus asked the question I had been expecting. "Is there any way we can rebuild our relationship? I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I miss having you in my life. Not for financial support, just for you. I want to know about your travels and your business and your relationship with David. I want to be a real part of your life again, not just someone who shows up when I need something." Rebuilding our relationship wasn't instant or automatic, but it was genuine. Marcus proved his sincerity through consistent actions rather than dramatic gestures. He called regularly just to check on me, remembered details about my business projects, and invited David and me to dinner at his modest apartment where he cooked a meal he had clearly spent considerable time preparing. The most meaningful moment came 6 weeks later when Marcus asked if he could bring someone to my Christmas dinner. I expected another girlfriend, but instead he arrived with his upstairs neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, whose family lived across the country. Frank was going to spend Christmas alone, and I thought maybe we could include him. Is that okay? Watching Marcus consider the feelings of someone who couldn't benefit him showed me that the son I had raised was still there underneath the entitlement Sarah had encouraged. He was learning to value relationships for their intrinsic worth, rather than their utility, a lesson that had been temporarily overshadowed, but never completely lost. David and Marcus developed their own friendship independent of me. They discovered a shared interest in woodworking, and Marcus started spending Saturday mornings in David's workshop learning to build furniture. These interactions happened naturally without my orchestration, which made them more meaningful than any forced bonding activities could have been. My business continued thriving, and I made the decision to expand into wedding planning services. The irony wasn't lost on me that my expertise gained through Marcus and Sarah's canceled wedding was now helping other families navigate their celebrations. But these clients valued my experience and input rather than just my financial contributions. The most profound change was in how I approached relationships. I had learned that unconditional giving wasn't the same as unconditional love. Real love sometimes requires boundaries, consequences, and the willingness to step back when your presence enables unhealthy behavior. I had done Marcus a disservice by shielding him from the natural consequences of his choices for so many years. When Mother's Day arrived, Marcus gave me a card he had written himself rather than purchased. Inside, he had written about the lessons he learned during our months apart, how my willingness to let him face consequences had forced him to develop integrity and self-reliance. "Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail," he wrote, "and thank you for being here when I was ready to grow up." As mothers, we often confuse enabling with supporting giving, with loving and avoiding conflict with maintaining relationships. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the opportunity to succeed or fail based on their own choices rather than our interventions. The most loving thing I ever did for Marcus was stepping back and allowing him to experience the consequences of choosing someone else's comfort over our family bond. Today, Marcus and I have a relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. He values my advice because he seeks it, not because he needs my money. I support his goals because I believe in them, not because I'm afraid of losing him. And when he eventually marries again, it will be to someone who sees our family relationship as an asset rather than a threat. The text message that nearly destroyed us ended up saving both of our lives. Marcus learned that real partnerships require respecting all family relationships, not choosing sides. I learned that self-respect sometimes means walking away from people who take you for granted, even when those people are your own children. And we both learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and setting boundaries that might damage your relationship? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and finding the courage to put yourself first. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. May you have the wisdom to know when to hold on and the strength to know when to let go.